Welcome to this Venus Alchemy presentation, preparing for 2020 online summit. Tami Brunk and myself, Cayelin will be talking about the wisdom of the grandmothers. And we're going to begin by opening sacred space and doing a prayer to the grandmothers. So here we go. Grandmothers, wise and loving ones, you who know the ways of love, the ways of peace, the ways of sustainability and responsible stewardship, the ways of wisdom that keep us in balance and harmony with our Earth Mother, living joyfully with all life, the ways of the rivers, lakes, oceans, the trees, the plants and animals, the ways of the natural cycles, including the ways of the sun and the moon within the seasonal cycles, the ways of all the planets and stars, the ways of the seasons and cycles of birth, growth, death, and rebirth, the ways of light and dark and the gifts that come from each, the ways of duality within great mystery and how to move beyond them, the ways of magic and alchemy, the ways of time and how to create new, nurturing, and sustainable timelines, the ways of inspired action through love, enhancing and nurturing all life, the ways of health and well-being, helping us to be the most effective in joyously living our life purpose in ways that foster strong community, nourishing and supporting everyone to thrive. Sacred grandmothers, guide me with all your wisdom to learn these ways so that I now help bring forth the new earth within me, wisely benefiting all life everywhere.
I love that. I feel like I felt that totally in all parts of me. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that too.
Yes.
Way to bring the grandmothers in. And so, you know, for people who are listening to this and you will get a copy of the PDF, you can say this prayer often and bring the grandmothers in to help and support you and guide you.
Yes. We love working with the grandmothers. Ever since we started working with the Venus cycles, with the grandmother cycle, the Capricorn cycle rather, Cayelin and I, and I'll just speak, we've just seen so much come through that. So exciting to be able to offer this to you. So just know that as I go through the outline and as we go through this, this video, this offering, that we will also be offering a more in-depth version. So some of these pieces we might kind of skim through really briefly, and you can always read later. You can read in depth, but also know that, you know, really be looking for that other deeper take on how to work with the grandmothers with more exercises and how to do that. So
and the video, the thing that Tami's talking about is we are going to offer, for those who get the package for this free online summit, we're going to be offering an additional bonus video with this more in-depth look at that for people who purchase that, well, along with some meditations and other things we're going to be offering.
Absolutely. And for this, all of the PDF is for you to keep for as long as you want to go more in depth than what we can cover in an hour. Right. So the first thing we'll talk about is, who are the grandmothers? When we talk about the wisdom of the grandmothers, what are we talking about? Who are we talking about? And then we'll talk about why this matters for the 2020 visioning process. How do the grandmothers support with that? We'll also bring in the Iroquois Confederacy and the clan mothers and how that relates to all of this. And then we'll do a beautiful process for the grandmothers asking questions, the kinds of questions that those wise elders might ask us at this time, that we might ask ourselves. And then I'll share some practices that I use to work with the grandmothers for asking their support for healing people that we love. And then Cayelin will share her own personal story about working with the grandmothers in the Cave of Initiation and the Hopi Prophecy, and there's a deep relationship there. And then I will speak into my own relationship with and my stories around working with the grandmothers and owl medicine, as they're also deeply connected. And then finally, we'll finish with a guided meditation with the owl grandmothers and complete with the grandmother's song that we think you'll enjoy.
So who are our grandmother guides? And this is something Tami and I started talking about as we were preparing this content and thinking, you know, that we have literal grandmothers that we experience, you know, our bloodline, our grandmothers that we have had as part of our growing up experience. So most people have had at least one grandmother, some maybe less. I had one grandmother. But sometimes more. My kids had like 3 or 4 grandmothers. Anyway, so that your bloodline grandmothers can be a beloved grandmother, elder woman of your bloodline that you've known personally, can also be from a distant past, somebody who's in our ancestral line that we've never met because they passed before we got here. They can also be an embodiment of DNA from past or future bloodlines.
Yeah. I want to say quickly about that too, Cayelin, as you're speaking to it, there can be a very powerful exercise we can do that I learned at one point, where if you can name back 7 generations, the 7 names of grandmothers going 7 times backward, that can be a very powerful connection to your matrilineal lineage. So just as a practice that you might want to do, see if you can find the names of the 7 women from your mother's side, and speak to them when in prayer and invocation.
That's a really good idea. And maybe you can only go back 3 or 4.
Sure. However far you can go back.
Work is, some people can go back 1,200 years. I met somebody who knew his bloodline back 1,200 years. Like,
wow.
So, most of us don't have that.
No.
So then we also have the grandmothers of our soul lineage. So if we think of bloodline, that is DNA that is connected to our, what we've inherited through the women, the grandmothers of the past. But our soul lineage is something beyond that. They can be star beings, they can be celestial guides, they can be from other realms and dimensions and galaxies. And many times they're here to help with this transition to the new earth. And we have also grandmother or elder guides that may be from different bloodlines or from past or parallel lives. So there's so many different ways that we can tune into the grandmother energy. And most everyone, I would say probably everyone does have a grandmother guide, at least one. Some has a whole team. Some people have a whole team of grandmothers. And part of the opportunity we have now is to really bring our awareness to who those guides may be and how they're here to help and support us as we are becoming seeds for the new earth, as we're becoming, as we are really becoming more conscious and aware of how we are seeding through our actions, through our intentions, through our thoughts, our words, our deeds, everything that we're doing, we're helping to be the seeds of the new earth.
Beautiful. And so as we consider this, we might think, who are the embodied grandmothers, those grandmothers among us who are appearing not in celestial form, not just in our meditations and our prayers and showing up for us in those ways, but how are we showing up in the flesh at this time? How is she coming to us, and how is she embodying in this world? So you might be a grandmother. And you might be a grandmother if you model elder wisdom, if you are concerned with our transition into the new earth, where humanity honors the earth and future generations. You may know many others who are also embodying that grandmother wisdom. So this grandmother wisdom we see as being beyond age. Grandmothers come in all ages. Were you, as a child, someone were you referred to as being wise beyond your years? I know Cayelin has had that experience. My mom would always say I was so wise. This is something that it's kind of like an indicator that you might be carrying this medicine. I think we probably all know children, so many children at this time who carry that kind of medicine of being these little wise emerging elders and who care deeply for the earth. And this is where I just pointed out the Tesat. I can never say this young man's name correctly, but he is a beautiful young soul who is, I think, he is of Chichimecan, I think, descent, or perhaps, I can't remember. He has indigenous and white lineage. He is the leader of the, I forget, the Earth Guardians youth group. And he just, from the time he was very young, when he spoke in front of the UN, he had a really powerful voice, and you can hear him speaking, and you can just hear the grandmother speak through him. Julia Butterfly Hill, who has a ton of Capricorn in her chart, she's another one that really embodies the grandmother wisdom. So just a couple of examples of beyond age. Also beyond gender. Again, though they hold feminine qualities, grandmothers defy gender roles. So sometimes, I think many of us have probably met boys and men who actually embody grandmother wisdom. I remember the first time I was really working with the grandmothers, I met this beautiful two men. One, he was probably in his 40s, Hispanic man, African-American man, probably also in his 40s. And they both had started this group working with youth of color in the Albuquerque area. And when I met them and talked to them, I immediately saw them as grandmothers. Sounds strange, but that's exactly the medicine they were carrying. And they may not have grandchildren, just because if you don't have grandchildren, you may never have grandchildren. And that doesn't mean that you will not, that you don't have that grandmother energy. So many of us have acted in a loving elder role with others, whether we've had grandchildren or not. And some women who have grandchildren don't really have that medicine or those qualities.
Yeah, Tami and I were having a conversation about our own grandmothers.
Yeah, we both had grandmothers who did not really savor that role.
Yeah, so we know of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk more about that as we go too.
Yeah, so within the shamanic astrology paradigm, it's understood that Capricorn, as a householder or culture bearer sign, has been holding the distortions of the patriarchy, and that at the turning of the ages, the essence of Capricorn is to be understood as feminine, as an earth sign. And all who work with the Capricorn mysteries are in service to the circle of the grandmothers, whose mission is to restore a human culture in harmony with the earth in the next 7 generations. Along with that, after I think Daniel had begun to really tune into this, in 2005, the Indigenous Council of the 13 Grandmothers was founded, which is kind of like a very real manifestation of this grandmother, the circle of the grandmother's energy that was coming in at that time.
I think their actual first ceremony was in 2004.
Okay.
And, you know, I know we're going to be talking about the Iroquois, but it was on Iroquois land where they did their first ceremony.
Right. Which also ties into what Cayelin's going to be talking about, the Hopi Prophecy. It all connects.
Right, right. So, do you want to do this one, Tami?
Sure. So part of why we feel that it's so important to tune into grandmother wisdom at this time and as part of this 2020 visioning project is because the great planetary alignment of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter is in the sign of Capricorn, which again is associated with grandmother and elder wisdom. So we see the circle of the grandmothers at the helm at the turning of the ages, hospicing the death of the old culture and midwifing the new earth. So to the degree that we can really tune into them and connect in with them and feel them, the ways that they reside within us, we think we can really be powerfully guided and strengthened in our work to vision and create new sustainable structures and culture to replace the dissolving cultures from before.
So cool. And really one of the reasons that we wanted to bring this through is because, you know, to have this understanding and awareness of the importance of the grandmothers and what they're bringing and how we can connect with that and get their guidance and their support as we prepare, as we have a good 2 years, you know, before we get to 2020 at the time of this recording, you know, so it's important. And one of the things we can do, I was on a hike one morning and I was asking the grandmothers, you know, what's your message? What would you want? And I started getting all these questions and I just recorded them on my phone so I would remember. And this is what they were. So I'm just going to share a few of them. I'm not going to share them all. You can definitely go and look at the PDF to get them and maybe just work through them, start working through them. One of the questions I really love is, what is the impact of the legacy you are leaving for this world? And, you know, we all leave a legacy, whether we think we're leaving a legacy or not. Who we are, what we do, how we interact with people. Maybe our legacy is kindness. Maybe our legacy is to help other people. Maybe our legacy is to, you know, some people will bring through brilliant things, write books and change lives, or, you know, whatever it might be. But sometimes just showing up and having a kind word for someone can be is just as important as things that seem like they're bigger. They're more amazing. So what is that legacy that you're leaving? And is it sustainable? And does it create beauty? This is something that's really important to consider as you're thinking about your legacy, and really you're creating your legacy from day to day. And does it empower people to be who they really are? Is the way that you're showing up, if you're trying to be in competition with somebody, if you're feeling threatened by somebody, then you're not really empowering each other, because you're not even feeling empowered. How could you possibly? So also you could think about the legacy as defined. Is it loving? Is it forgiving? Is it joyful, fun, and loving? Is it creatively communicating? Are you finding ways to creatively communicate your legacy and to really do that deeper inner reflection so that you can have a sense of what it is that you are creating from day to day? And also helping to restore our sacred relationship with the earth. If you're doing that for yourself, then you, just by your actions and by what you're doing that for others. And, of course, caring for our bodies is important. And a lot of times we're not even aware of how the food we eat, the thoughts we think, the actions we take are affecting our physical body. And the grandmothers would like us to just think about that. And, are we willing to step up and do what we need to do? And of course, how does what you do affect your children, your children's children, or any children because some people won't have children, but it's also, we are all connected to children in some way, and how does that affect the generations that will follow? So that gets you a kind of a sense of this, of some of these questions that we might ask. Perhaps the last question here we can also look at is that, are you taking steps to change your perspective? To be aware of the places where you get triggered or hooked into an emotional response that puts you, it's like a little typo there, that puts you in survival mode. And in our second video, we're going to do a piece on the 3 difficult things. 1, becoming aware of where we get triggered, and then how do we make a different choice, a better choice around that, and how do we create that as a practice. So,
beautiful.
So the grandmothers would really say to us, awareness is the first step to changing our point of view. And this does have Lisa Teal's grandmother song here, but we'll also have it at the end of the presentation.
I love those questions.
Thank you.
So when Cayelin had mentioned some of us might have a team of grandmothers, I think definitely that's the thing that first came through for me when we first started working with this, was an entire community of grandmothers that started coming through, just flowing through. And I would invite any of you to invite your own personal team of grandmother guides to work with you. Because I know when I hold circle, anytime I create sacred space, whether I'm leading a women's new moon circle or a Venus circle or a dreaming circle, whatever it is, when I call in space, when I drum to call in space, the first thing I invite, the first guides I invite in are always a circle of the grandmothers. They always encircle the room. And I found them to be some of the most powerful protectors and the deepest loving presence. And when I invite them in, I invite my own grandmother guides, but also sometimes I'll invite in the grandmother guides of others. And it becomes a very large community. And I've also found one of the most powerful things about working with the grandmothers is that you can invite or ask for the support of the grandmothers of people that you love when they're going through a hard time. If, for example, I've had 3 instances with friends, family, who are going through a major crisis or operation in the hospital, now 4 actually, as of yesterday, where I asked the grandmothers of this person I love to be present with them. And I would travel, in my vision and my imagination, and I definitely feel a part of me is there. I would travel to that hospital room and see them before they go through surgery often, or during, and then I would ask their grandmothers to come, and they just hold such a loving space. Sometimes you'll see them it's almost like they're cooking meals, or they're rubbing the feet, or they're anointing oils, or they're just holding this beautiful space of love and calm and peace and healing. And you might be surprised by who shows up when you invite in the grandmothers of someone. I know sometimes it's what you might expect. When I first did this, my friend Leora was going through brain surgery, and I asked her grandmothers to be with her, and she's Jewish, and they were just these beautiful little Jewish grandmothers. Some of them were speaking in Yiddish, and they were just this wonderful presence, and they were, again, fussing over her. They were holding her, giving her strength and healing. It was so sweet. Then when my brother was going through surgery, I invited his grandmothers, and they were Japanese. And I was a little surprised by that. But when I tuned into it, he's always been interested in kind of samurai culture. He has certain qualities that might be associated with some aspects of Japanese culture. He's an engineer who really values really training his mind, being very precise. He has a strong code of honor. There's certain qualities that kind of resonate with that. So don't be surprised if you are surprised by the grandchildren.
And definitely surprised, perhaps, too, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, my little nephew just went through surgery, and I invited his grandmothers, and he has Mexican grandmothers, and he has European grandmothers. And again, it was so sweet to see them all intermingling and supporting him. So, so the Iroquois Confederacy, and I'm just going to kind of zoom through this really quickly because we only have so much time, and you can read through this on your own, and we might go into more depth with it in the other version. But basically, when we recorded this video, it was not too long after the total solar eclipse of 2017, August 21st. And when I was doing research on this, I discovered that the Iroquois Confederacy was founded in 1142, right after a total solar eclipse had swept across Canada and the Northeast US. And so what's significant, and I'll just say too, that the Iroquois Confederacy as a governing system was something that deeply informed the US Constitution. Their great law of peace was something that deeply informed Benjamin Franklin and other founders. And so, if you want to move to the next slide, Cayelin. So basically, the great law of peace includes freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right of women to participate in government, separation of powers, checks and balances. So their governing structure had some of the highest qualities and most progressive values and qualities that were integrated into our Constitution. And what got left out, of course, was the seventh generation principle and the role of women, because clan mothers were actually very powerful within the system. So this is part of what connects into what Daniel Giamario first tuned into when he talked about Capricorn as being connected to the circle of the grandmothers or clan mothers, is that there's this idea that within some of the most evolved cultural frameworks, there's a concern for the next 7 generations, and the women have a strong, strong place of leadership. And this grandmother wisdom is the leading wisdom that is really promoted and integrated.
And just something to know is that the Iroquois warned the U.S., the people that were forming the Constitution, if they left out the grandmothers, they left out the circle of grandmothers, then we would have problems. It just wasn't going to, it wouldn't work over time. And guess what?
Guess what? We get to see that. Yeah, so I'll just say too, I was fascinated as I was doing research into this, that in the stories of the Iroquois Confederacy and its founding, you will learn about the great peacemaker, you'll learn about Hiawatha and their role in bringing together the warring tribes and helping create the great law of peace. Also, though, there's a woman who's less frequently spoken of, and she's the third of those 3 who helped to create the great law of peace. And her name was Jigansasi, and she was the mother of the clan mothers. So she was the first clan mother. So I like to also invite her in anytime I talk about the circle of the grandmothers and the clan mothers. And just imagine her as being at the table when any great big decisions are made now. So the idea then is that at the total solar eclipse, August 21st, 2017, many of us were engaged in guided meditations, and we were leading up to the eclipse, following the eclipse. Many of us have been focusing our intent on really doing this kind of reset of the spiritual blueprint for the U.S., for Turtle Island. And so in shamanic astrology, the total solar eclipse was like a super new moon. Intentions are amplified. It's with the North Node, so you can see it as realigning us with our original intent. And so many of us were doing that work around the time of the eclipse to kind of do that reset. And so we can imagine that the grandmothers since the time of the eclipse and the clan mothers, as originally envisioned as part of this U.S., the original intent of the founding of the U.S. and how we conduct ourselves, that we can imagine that now they are at the helm through us as those individuals who are attuned to their wisdom.
Yes, beautiful. Now, sometimes I just want to say, sometimes people think a super new moon is like a perigee moon when the moon is closest to the earth, and that's been a definition that has been kind of taken over. So this is specifically about a new moon that is an eclipse, and I like to sometimes call it a mega moon.
That's right, a mega moon. Awesome.
Because it's really big. The impact of what's happening is really, really big.
So this is just a few more resources on, and you can actually look these up based on the titles, that resources that can give you some more information on the Iroquois Confederacy.
Beautiful. So I'm just going to touch on some of this information as well, and you can come back and read this and so on. But one of the things that really inspired Tami and I to work with the Circle of Grandmothers was when we first did the Venus online class back in 2014. It was in the Capricorn Meta Goddess that was online, and it reminded me of this dream I had in 2006. And I was standing in front of this cave, and it was dark inside. I couldn't see anything. So, and I knew, I had this like knowing, don't go in there. You need to be invited. It's like not okay to just walk in. So, and I love caves, and I usually like to explore them, but I turned around and I was walking away. And then I hear, or I have this sense of someone calling to me, and I turn around and I see Sekhmet. And she's standing at the entrance of the cave and kind of waiting for me to come down. And she's in this sort of etheric glow, like she's in between the worlds, not really in this world and not really in the other world, that she's, there's like this portal going on. And she waves her hand in front of the cave, and it lights up, and there's a circle of women, and I'm being invited to come and sit in the middle and get an initiation. And so I thought this image here of Sekhmet is kind of in that etheric glow. It's somewhat, not exactly like in the dream, but I went through this whole initiation in this cave that was suddenly lit up from the inside with these women. And I wrote it down in my journal because it was so profound. It just was like, knocked me over. And then 6 months later, I come across this book, Woman at the Edge of Two Worlds, A Spiritual Journey Through Menopause. And mind you, in 2006, I had just turned 50 when I had this dream. So, and I was literally in menopause. I didn't know at the time, but I was. 6 months later, I actually had my, so when I found this book, I had just had my last menstrual cycle. And so then I read in the book this telling by Agnes Whistling-Elk, who's a grandmother guide for Lynn Andrews, who wrote the book. And she's talking about, at the change of life comes the highest initiation that you would live through as a woman. And that it's an initiation into your sacred and spiritual work. And younger women are not allowed into the sacred caves that held this knowledge. These caves were called different names around the world, but she just talks about what she's knowing. And she's saying that there's some in physical reality and some in the dream time. And of course, mine was in the dream time. And that the guardian that you will meet, that you'll become familiar with, is the woman at the edge of two worlds. And she is the goddess who initiates all women into their sacredness. And she takes you through the labyrinth of mystery and change as you become changing woman, and helps you to discover the plateaus of consciousness. And she goes on to talk about how it's important not to become scared at that time, and that whatever it is that you learn in this initiation is something that you can then later take and bring out to other women and help support them. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, that's my dream. That you can help others with this information. And so that, and this is also something that had been lost because of the patriarchy. that most of these initiations, especially for this phase of life, hasn't been something that's happened in our physical reality for quite a long time. So, so that I realized that initiation had been by the grandmothers, and that I had been given this gift, and it was pretty powerful. And so it wasn't until later that I was able to put more of the pieces together. And so part of it comes from the Hopi Prophecy. And interestingly, in 1986, on the Day of Peace, in the Year of Peace, there was a First Earth Run. And it was the Hopi elders had been told that they needed to go to the Hall of Glass, I think, and
Micah.
Well, it was Micah, but it was also glass. So anyway, the Hall of Micah, but they thought that the United Nations, the Hall of Glass, was the Hall of Micah. And so they, and they were also told that they were going to have to ask 4 times. That there were 3 times they'd already been turned down, and this was their 4th and final chance to be able to speak in front of the UN General Assembly and to give them the prophecy. And so Chief Shenandoah of the Iroquois Nation, so we bring in the Iroquois again, he begins the General Assembly by rubbing 2 sticks together in the ancient way and creating a blazing fire. And then Grandmother Cayelin of the Hopi Nation offered this prophecy that humanity is at a crossroads. To continue on this planet, we're being called to achieve a higher level of global community where we can experience what unites us. Grandmother Cayelin's message of hope inspired everyone in attendance, and over the next 86 days, almost 3 months, the message was communicated in one form or another to 25 million people and 45 heads of state in 62 countries who directly participated in the passage of this torch of fire that from what Chief Shenandoah had created. They passed the fire to these different countries and people and heads of state. Pretty powerful. And then the other thing that just to keep in mind is that the Hopi also say that when the blue star, the China, makes its appearance in the heavens, the 5th world will emerge, and it represents a time of purification. And some believe that the Hopi star, the China, is their name for Sirius. So some say that that's already happened. Some say it's still going to happen. I don't know, but it's just something to be aware of as part of the Hopi prophecy. And that, they're talking about a time of peace and plenty and illumination for all. However, there's also a little bit more to that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But I just wanted to share that in this beaded necklace that you see pictured here and that I'm wearing, it was it's something that was gifted to me right around the time of the eclipse, actually in 2017. It was gifted to me. And there's circles within circles here as a friend of mine, Robbie Nelson, who's pictured here, she's the co-founder of Buffalo Women Ranch in Dove Creek. And I had an opportunity to do a ceremony with her when there were 7 planets aligned at a new moon in May of 2000. 5/5/2000, there were books written about it. It was like, considered to be a really significant time. And so I was at her place, Buffalo Women Ranch, with several of my Tucson priestesses. We did this huge ceremony, and I received this Firebird ring, and literally within a day of having had a dream where I was told I had returned to live with the bird people. So receiving this necklace, I have never done a croning ceremony, even though I am 61. I know people who've done them at 50, mid-50s, 60, whatever, and I just never felt inspired to do that. But I suddenly realized that by being gifted this beaded necklace that had belonged to Grandmother Cayelin. Oh, and the other piece about that is when I was at Buffalo Women Ranch, Grandmother Cayelin had just passed, and we talked a lot about her and did ceremony in honor of her and her life. And at that time, my name was Carolyn. So I felt an affinity with her. So this feels like the universe saying to me, okay, you can now step more fully into your grandmother wisdom.
Beautiful.
So this is an image of Prophecy Rock, and you can look at this in more detail later, but it's just showing some of the things that are happening here. And I have been here. Some of the pictures that will follow are from times when I've been there. But it's just also telling us, you know, this top path here on Prophecy Rock, it's the path of destruction. They call it the path of the two-hearted. And that's where it has to do with technology and not taking care of the earth, and, you know, the greed factor that tends to be part of what's happening, and that is a path of destruction. And the path of the one-hearted is a path that continues forever, and comes from as a path of the heart. So that's really what Prophecy Rock is really intending for us to you know, like to warn people, to remind people, you know, what path are you on? So here's actually, here's Prophecy Rock. It's in Arizona, and I live in Arizona. I've been there a couple of times. And it's very important piece to the Hopi. And here's just, there's some other petroglyphs that are also around where the literal prophecy is. And these have different meanings. I don't remember, but I just thought people might be interested in seeing them. And then this is where Prophecy Rock is. This is me standing here looking at it. And if you get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. It's pretty amazing. And then again, just putting the imagery above the Prophecy Rock, and you can go back and look at some of this and tune in and see how it feels to you. Also, one of the things that the Hopi prophecy was indicating is that near the time when we get to purification, there will be cobwebs spun back and forth in the sky. And this definitely looks like that. And you know, for people who are aware of the chemtrails, it may be part of that. It's actually part of the Hopi prophecy that is coming to fruition. So that is part of what we're looking at. And if we think about our time going up to 2020, when we have this powerful planetary alignment, the more we can do to prepare ourselves personally, the better. And you know, the more that we'll be in a place to be the seeds for the new earth. And working with the imagery of Grandmother Spider, or as the Hopi called her, Spider Grandmother, who is the creatrix of the world and responsible for the stars in the sky. And she joins the earth with the sky. And so she wove a web and she tossed it up into the sky, and it became the stars. It was also laced with dew, and the dew is what became the stars. But anyways, it really has this whole piece of sacred geometry connected to it. And of course, Capricorn is very much connected to the sacred geometry. And so the story also is that Grandmother Spider caused a hollow reed or bamboo to grow into the sky, and then that was how the Hopi emerged into the fourth world, and that's where we are. And it was at the Sipapu, or Sipapu meaning the place of emergence, that's somewhere in the Grand Canyon. And then this is just another image. This is in Canyon de Chelly, actually. This is Grandmother Spider Rock. The weaving that goes on there, just so some fun images to tune into. And then this is some petroglyphs that I've actually been to in Mesa Verde around the same time, that May of 2000 time. We hiked to this petroglyph site, and the symbol where the blue arrow is pointing is the symbol for the Sipapu, and where the Hopi emerged from the earth in their creation story, emerged out of the Grand Canyon. And then also there's a story of Spider Woman who, how she created the earth. And I'm not going to go into that right now because I want to make sure we have time for everything else we want to cover, but it's a great story that you can read about when you get a chance to check out the PDF. And she is a creatrix. She is weaving the web. She is the weaver, we are the web. She is the needle, we are the thread, Grandmother Spider Woman. And so wherever anything is out of place in the web, it's our responsibility now to become aware so that we can reweave that part of the web into a healthy, vibrant expression of the new earth that serves everyone and not just a few. So that's still this Hopi story. I guess, yeah, we could just say that It's time for us to remember the creative gifts and wisdom of Grandmother Spider to assist us in co-creating a new web of life, a new, even more beautiful and harmonious way of living and working together. So how do we mend the tears in the web? How do we weave a new web where needed, fulfilling this intent? So that's just a good question, a good couple of questions to be with as we make our journey towards 2020.
Yes, so I'm not going to take too much time to share my personal stories just because I'm going to be leading a guided meditation, but just a little bit that when we have really noticed a strong connection in working with the grandmother's medicine and also working with owl medicine in our Venus community, especially when working with the Capricorn cycle, but even beyond. Women and men have been visited by owls in dreams and waking life. It's a very common occurrence. And for myself, this was a really strong and powerful connection because my own grandmother deeply loved owls. I think of her as kind of an owl woman. And she was born in the Ozarks in, very, very rural kind of, as she was a farmer's wife. She was my grandfather's wife, even though she had tried to make him promise to not keep her in the country. When they got married, she kind of got stuck there, and in a culture that really it was very literal, that owls were actually maligned. They were seen in a very negative light, such that my grandfather, his father, he would call owls in and shoot them in front of my grandmother just to show that he could do it, just to be mean-spirited. And I often thought of that story, and I thought about the way that owls were perceived in that part of the world, and in many, in even modern culture, they've often been seen in kind of a negative light, and in a similar way to women's intuition and magic and inner knowing has often been seen in a negative light. And I think my grandmother embodied what we may talk more about in the next class, the deeper class, which is can be the ways that sometimes our own grandmothers and our own elders, our own female ancestors, experienced a lot of the wounding of the patriarchy because they couldn't fully express who they were. And so part of working with grandmother wisdom can involve healing the feminine ancestral line. And considering, my grandmother was very cold in her way of connecting with her grandchildren. And I think I learned when she developed dementia and got older, I started to see more of the child part of herself, and I got to see more of her heart and connect with her. And there was a lot of healing that happened with that. So I really recommend, and I'd recommend if you are able to get the package and take our next class, and we will go more into the ways that we can do that deeper work to heal our ancestral feminine line.
Beautiful.
And a little more about grandmothers and owls. For me, Pluto was right on my midheaven in Capricorn when we began this Venus and Capricorn cycle, when we began this Venus work. So for me, often I was working with the owl medicine. I was having a lot of dreams about great horned owls, about their connection to death and rebirth. And I had a very powerful vision where a circle of owl grandmothers, it was grandmothers who were wearing the mask of owl, they were wearing the wings of owl, that they helped me to die a good death. And that inspired me to create the guided meditation that we're going to be taking you through now. And the reason this guided meditation that we're kind of completing this initial webinar or this video with is because when we as we're entering this threshold into 2020, as we're preparing to be those seed people that are needed to bring in the new world, what many of us are needing to do at this time is to die to our old selves and bring in that new mind, bring in that new light body that's needed to step into this new realm and create the new structure and really see the vision that is possible. So with that,
I just wanted to say quickly, Tami, one of the things is that sometimes owls are considered an omen of death. And what's interesting is that from 1995 to 2002, I experienced at least one death every year. And I had owls. Every time I went walking, I would have like flocks. At first I'd see one owl. Then I would see a couple of owls. And then I saw as many as 7 owls all at once in the same place where I walked all the time, and I'd walk through. And then after the death stopped, I stopped seeing the owls. And and I didn't see that as a bad thing. I really felt like they were there to help support me in navigating all that, all those death experiences that were happening for me. And then when I didn't need them anymore, they were gone.
So, absolutely. And I think many of us have had that literal experience with owl, and it is part of where the superstitions have come in. I can say that for myself, I didn't want to go into too much personal, but there's so many owl stories. And my father, when he passed, the last visit I had with him when he was alive, he and my mother were still struggling with the idea of his death. But when I slept at their house, I heard a barred owl hooting right at my window. And I knew immediately that my dad was going to die soon. And he did within about 3 weeks. And so I've had the same experience. And also I've had a really powerful dream that was about the death of a relationship, where in the dream I was holding rattlesnakes and I had to let go of those rattlesnakes. And when I woke, and there was a red-tailed hawk that grabbed the rattlesnake, ripped off its head. And as soon as that happened, I woke up with a great horned owl hooting at my window. And in that moment, I knew I had to break off this relationship. So owls can have to do with physical death, and they can have to do with literal death. And like Cayelin, I don't see it as a spooky or a scary thing. I always feel myself to be in the presence of the sacred when I connect with owl, and when I connect with that wisdom, and that kind of, it does connect to the crone aspect of the grandmothers. It does connect to, again, this idea that it's the grandmother wisdom in us when we access that will help us to be a positive force in helping to hospice this old culture that is falling apart around us, and help others in that process of that kind of hospicing, that sacred passage, and also to be the grandmothers who are helping bring in and midwife the new earth. So as grandmothers, we're learning to stand in that threshold between life and death. So this journey then is a support for that. So we're going to begin the guided meditation now. So if you could find a comfortable place for yourself, hopefully somewhere where you feel fairly warm. You might want to lie down. You certainly won't want to be driving or doing anything that could be dangerous. You'll want your full attention as we do this guided meditation. So once you find a place to get comfortable, just take a couple of deep breaths. Feel the weight of your body. And now imagine that you find yourself in a winding path through a deep forest, surrounded by great and ancient trees. And as you walk, the already dark forest continues to darken until you can barely see the path in front of you. Suddenly you see a dark shape fly out before you, and you know that it is an owl. As you watch owl fly away, you see that it is leading you down another path toward a light off in the distance. Suddenly you hear the sound of singing, a haunting, beautiful song, a song you feel permeating your skin, your flesh, your bones. It is an invitation, and you feel a deep part of yourself say yes as you follow owl. You come upon a great clearing surrounded by a circle of enormous trees. Within this clearing, you see the shapes of women, a circle of women, singing around a ceremonial fire. One of the women turns, seeing you, and beckons to you. As she does, the singing stops, and a great silence descends upon the forest. As the firelight illuminates the face and shape of this woman and the others, you see that they are grandmothers. Yet these are grandmothers you have never met before. They are the owl grandmothers, the ones who officiate the sacred rites of ceremonial death and rebirth. They wear the mask of the great horned owl and robes of her owl feathers. You feel drawn as if by an invisible thread into the center of the circle. The grandmothers gather around you, some now humming quietly, others making soft cooing and hooting owl sounds. They gently and lovingly remove your clothing, and you feel the cool night air on your naked skin. They bathe you in holy waters, strong with the scent of pungent herbs used for cleansing and purification. They massage your body with scented oils, and it feels as if everything you have needed to release is beginning to soften, preparing to fall away from your body, your memory, and your awareness. They smudge you with sage, with sweet grass, with copal, and with other sweet incense from whatever country your ancestors come. And now they are complete with the cleansing ritual. They lead you to a patch of soft green grass and help you to lie on your back on the sweet earth. They spread your arms out to the sides of your body. They take wooden hoops with sharpened ends and place them over your ankles and wrists, pushing them into the soil to anchor your body firmly into the earth. Somehow you feel peaceful, you feel expectant, and you feel ready. And now that you are fully anchored, naked and clean on the sweet earth, the owl grandmothers begin to sing again. This time your skin and body are so sensitive that it is as if the melody caresses your skin and gently begins the process of breaking down your physical body. You recognize that you are being called back to the earth and to the soil. And as they begin to sing, you see that they are calling all the creatures of the forest, the ravens, the vultures, the coyote, the wolves, the mountain lions, the beetles, and even the microorganisms from the soil to be present at your deathbed and to partake of your body as a holy feast, as a celebration, as an offering. You feel no pain as you experience your physical body being devoured and taken apart by all the wild creatures and the earth herself. It feels almost as if, with every piece of flesh taken from your body, with every shard of bone broken down and returned to the soil, you are giving away every experience of heartbreak, every broken dream, every trauma, betrayal, and wounding. You feel the sensation of being so very heavy, so at one with gravity, with density, with the physical. Yet somehow at the very same time, you have begun to feel and see your luminous light body growing brighter and clearer, replacing your older physical body as it is breaking down. You feel the strong, verdant push, the sensation of the small trees and plants pushing up through what remains of your rib cage, your sinew, your bones, as the plants and trees take their share of the feast that is your old physical body, your old stories, your old pain, as well as the pain and suffering and wounding of your grandmothers and your grandfathers and all your descendants. And suddenly you see the sky begin to lighten, and you see the sun appear, streaming through the great trees in the circle surrounding. You feel the warmth, the energy, the aliveness of the sun. And within the sun's body, you see Venus, as she is now nearing her entrance into the underworld. And within the body of the sky, you also feel all of the other energies of the planets. And as you do, you feel the luminous light body rise up through a small tree, and you feel how your body is regenerating from the soil, and now you are everything. You are the tree, you are the coyote, you are the beetle, and you are the owl. You are the sun, you are Venus, you are Earth herself. You feel new and alive, vibrant and free. And now your spirit, your luminous light body once again contracts so that it once again takes the shape of your physical body, becoming denser, but not too heavy, fleshing you back out into yourself, except that now you feel new, vibrant, refreshed, and strong. Your clear light body has regenerated, and it is pulsing and shining around you, connecting you to the heavens and to Mother Earth, and sourcing you with your own personal divine essence. And now you see that the grandmothers have removed their masks. They are beaming at you. They are celebrating you. And you see that among them are your sisters and brothers and all the circles of your human family that you love. We celebrate your death. We celebrate your life. We celebrate our connections and all that we have died to in order to be reborn. And now after you've come out of this meditation and after you've returned to the room where you began, take a moment to make sure that every part of you has come back into this physical body, into this room. And then take a moment to journal or draw any guidance you've received from your time with the owl grandmothers. And know you can return at any time to die to your old self and be reborn.
That's a very cool meditation, Tami.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so appropriate for what is it that we need to die to? How do we die to our old selves so we can be reborn to our true selves? And that's really a big question as we move to 2020. And that continually going through that process over and over. So I hope many people will revisit this meditation over the next couple of years as we prepare for 2020. And also something that you can do that can help you. I love this song. You can find it on YouTube. Lisa Teal, she actually lives here in Tucson. I've met her, and she's amazing. She's done amazing goddess songs, and her album Journey to the Goddess. Anyway, it's grandmother's song, and this song was really significant for me when we were doing our first Venus journey with the grandmothers. I was singing what I could remember of it and having extraordinary experiences with rainbows, actually. So powerful song. So just, if taking the time to tune into it, and it's an invocation really to the grandmothers, where they're weaving the rainbow, they're weaving the light, they're weaving the threads of our lives, and how can they help us on our journey, on our spirit journey, and guide us on the path of light. And so it's a great song to learn and sing with Lisa as she sings it so beautifully.
Beautiful. I just want to add one short thing about this, which is that I wanted to just emphasize too, when we began to talk about who the grandmothers were, that for me at least, what came through really early on was this idea that they connect to our DNA. And I love with this, there's the weaving that comes up with this song, there's all the weaving with the spider medicine, there's so much of this weaving the new world. And to me, it does feel like that spiral. It's that spiraling DNA that in some way the grandmothers are an embodied expression of our healed DNA, of the DNA and the potential. Again, it's the seed people that we are, that once we've healed the trauma in our own DNA, that this is how they express in the future and in the past.
I love that. And I love how you brought all the weaving, the threads, and the spider grandmother. And it's so true. It's like,
it all connects.
Bring it all together. Woohoo! So we just want to let you know that Tami and I do online ceremonial journey with Venus. There'll be another one starting in March of 2018, the Ascent Journey. And you can go to venusalchemy.com to get more information. Also in January, we will be starting another Venus signature, getting personal with our inner goddess. Who are we meant to be? What's our feminine expression? And what are all the clues that let us know what that is? And it's not just one thing, it's many things. And then again, for those of you who have purchased this online Preparing for 2020 Summit package, we will have an additional free bonus video It's going to go deeper into how to connect with your personal grandmother guides as we navigate toward 2020, along with some really great ways that you can cultivate practices of, what it is we're letting go and what it is we're embracing and bringing forward as we are creating, we're meant to be the seeds for the new earth. And so how can we be the best seeds possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we'll also be making available on our website the underworld, Venus Underworld, because it is kind of coinciding with Venus dropping into the underworld coinciding. So we'll be doing another video, and we'll make that available as well to everybody who is participating in the free summit. So anything you want to say in closing, Tami?
Oh, just gratitude for everyone who's gathered, and just feeling so much gratitude always, and excitement to be alive at this time, and to be, for so many of us, to be waking up to the wisdom of the grandmothers that lives inside of us and creating this new world together.
And it's so magical.
It is. It is.
I know Tami and I are constantly like, whoa, this is so magical and amazing. And we'd love for you to join us in any way that you feel called, and otherwise just, being how you can find the magic in your own life by cultivating your presence at this time as a seed, as a person who is a seed for the new earth. So thank you all so much for watching.